Okay, so good morning. For today's discussion, we are now on topic 4, all about auditors' response to assess risk. So these modules or topic 3 and 4 are related, okay? So which means they have a huge correlation and should be taken whenever you're doing review. So you should be taking it both at the same time, right? Uh, all right, so our discussion will go through this. These are important sections here: sufficient appropriate audit evidence, test control, substantive audit procedure, any issues on evidence gathering, okay? Work of auditors and experts, how we will be able to maximize it, uh, evidence gathering in an e-commerce environment, particularly nowadays we have that the technology and you as an auditor, how you will work with it, audit of small businesses. So we have to be mindful of the size and complexity of the business whenever we do audit. Subsequent events and completion. Okay, so we're almost done with the whole process of the audit. Okay, and for this session, these are relevant standards that I wish you go through. Most important here will be ISA 315, all about assessing risk and how to understand the entity. Audit evidence, okay, that's another important aspect of the discussion here, and audit documentation. Okay. So these are major standards, and also uh, going concern issues. Partially, we'll discuss about that, but we will have a specific discussion on certain topic using the work of auditors expert and events after reporting period. So those are major discuss or standards that you need to go through whenever you talk about assessment or assess risk response. Okay, so when you talk about audit evidence, that is your basis whenever you provide your opinion. Okay, so as an auditor, you need to design your work in order for you to collect evidences. Okay, so evidences can be electronic document, auditor's favorite. Uh, it can also be physical, which means there will be physical manifestation of the evidence. Photographs, okay, if you are taking photographs and keeping it as part of your evidence, that's also part of it. Recording, okay, interview, uh, survey sheet, and these things. So those are part of your collection and it will become your evidence. Now, your evidence should be based on the assertion that you're testing. Okay, that's important. For example, if the assertion, and I wish for you to go through a recording on assertion, I had put it in Moodle. In assertion, this is what we call representation made by the client. These are the things that they are trying to communicate with the user of information. So, for example, if their assertion is saying they are they have a property that exists on this particular area, okay, so that is the assertion. Now you have to design your audit or your work in order for you to get evidence. So in testing what we call physical presence of the property, so your procedure now is to visit site or make a site visit of the property, and then you will document your work using either maybe a written or photograph. Okay, so without evidence, you will not be able to conclude, okay, on something. Okay, how can you say that your client really have that property if you don't have evidence? Another aspect of that is when you're trying to check whether a particular transaction happened, we call it occurrence. Okay, particularly sale. Sale, if it is already executed, the only evidence that you will have will be what? Invoice. So now you have to design your audit in order for you to confirm that whether that transaction or the sale really happened. So your the assertion of the client is they're saying that the sale recorded in their balance sheet, sorry, in their income statement really or had happened. So you as an auditor, you have to design your audit procedure to test whether those transactions really happened. So what we'll do now is to inspect invoices. Okay, the details, whom they have sold it, okay, how much, how many units they have sold, did they charge GST, is it subject to GST, any credit terms. So you have to design your audit procedure so that you will have evidence. Now, the invoice that you inspected, the copy of that will be your evidence. So we call it documentary evidence. Right? Clear? So your evidence will be, of course, obtained by from procedures, and your procedure should be designed to test assertion. Clear on the simple cycle? Okay. So insufficient appropriate audit evidence, you as an auditor have to design audit procedure to collect sufficient appropriate audit evidence as mentioned in ISA 500. Now the problem with that is what is sufficient and what is appropriate. So that's a question. How much evidences that you need to collect so that you will say that is enough for me to say okay, that's fine. Okay. And another one is what will be the quality of evidence that I will say it's okay with me. I don't need to extend so much. This is enough. Okay. So going back to that auditing the existence of a property is site visit or physically seeing the property enough for you to say the property exists. Yes or no? Do you need to visit 10 times so that you will say, yeah, this. Yes? No. No need. Only once confirm, that's fine. We call it appropriate evidence. Clear? Okay, going to the sale. How many invoices do you will require, or let us say set a percentage, that you will be convinced that the sale really happened? 100% if you can. But how about if it is let us say 10 million invoices? Do you wish to review all 10 million invoices? No. So you need to set samples. The question is, how many samples you will require? That will depend on your materiality level, and that, okay, you will be able to determine sufficiency. Clear? How many times, let us say, if there will be a DEERS audit to confirm whether the class here on AF 0305 happening, are they supposed to attend all those 12 week session? No, they just have to pick some dates or some weeks just to confirm whether the class is really happening, right? So how many? We don't really know because again, they have to set the materiality. How much is enough for them? Clear? Okay, so that's how efficiency and appropriateness work. Okay, so in ISA 500, it says sufficiency relates to the quantity of evidence, audit evidence. Appropriateness is relating to relevance and reliability of audit evidence. So clear? Now let's talk about reliability of evidence. When you talk about reliability of evidence, and you can see a guideline provided by ISA 500 here. Let's just go through some points. So this is a generalization, which means most likely using heuristics, we will say evidence are fine with me. Okay. Evidence is more reliable when it is obtained from independent sources outside the entity. Okay, your client will have cash ledger, right? And you're reviewing how much cash they have as at particular date, let's say 31st December, the cut-off date. Now, the bank will also issue bank statement at the end, okay, 31st December. Now, the question is, which is more reliable? Okay, we're talking about evidence. Which will be more reliable? The one that the management is presenting in their general ledger or the one issued by the bank? Okay, based on generalization on reliability of audit evidence, the information that you obtain from independent source will be more reliable than the one that you obtain within the entity. Okay, we're not saying that the client is messing with you, they are lying with you. What we're trying to say is the quality. Take note, the quality of evidence. Clear? I will say I'm the best lecturer around the world. Okay, nothing can beat me. Okay, these guys are they're doing their lousy job. But will you rely on what I have said? You need someone to verify whether what I'm saying is true. Clear? That is what we call generalization of audit evidence. Okay, clear, future auditors? We are not saying Mr. Milford is lying, maybe, okay, but we need someone to cross check, okay, whether that is correct. Right, next. Evidence obtained directly by auditor is more reliable than obtained indirectly or inference. Okay, for example, uh, the class in AF0305 is cancelled today. And it was mentioned by one of your classmates. Hey, we don't have class today. Then you asked me directly. And then I said, no, we will have class today. Which information you will rely on? The one that you obtained directly. Correct? Not through Facebook post. So they're spreading no class for today. Hey. So you obtain it with reliable source directly will be paid. More quality or will have more quality than the one you obtain second hand. Clear? So these are rules on evidences. Generalization on evidence. Okay, I'm not saying the information that you obtain from secondary source is wrong. No. But if you want to test the appropriateness of evidences, this will be your guide. Another example here. Normally, we will believe those written representation rather than the oral representations. Okay. Is it okay? So, for example, if you're asking for your marks or your grade, and we issued a paper there saying that you got HD, what usually will happen? Will you doubt? It's already HD, so please. No more question. Okay. Let us say if it is F written in your transcript. Okay, it's already written, huh? And then what I'm trying to say to you is, I think you passed the unit. It should be P. Okay. Now remember, rules on evidence. The written one will be more reliable than the one being spoken. Okay. That's why whenever there is an interview, they will put it in record, write it, and then ask to reconfirm. Okay. So as an auditor in the future, if you conduct interview, put it in writing, and then cross-refer to the one that you had interviewed, and then ask, can you confirm whether what I have written in here is correct? Clear? Okay, rules on evidence. Huh? Okay, so going back to the financial statement assertion, I will not repeat myself there. But what I want to emphasize is, now it depends on how you assess the risk. Okay, what will be your audit strategy or the procedure that you will do. Okay, so if you go back to that ARIRCRDR that I mentioned, audit risk, inherent risk, control risk, detection risk. Okay, you know that there will be relationship between these components, and then you will arrive on which audit strategy that you will perform. Okay, so we have two major audit strategies here: test of controls and substantive procedures. Now, on test of controls, okay, your task on test of controls is to identify and cross-check or review the controls implemented by your client. Okay, when you enter the audit engagement, you will be able to be or to obtain policies and procedures, standard operating procedures, guidelines, okay, processes, and these things. Okay, so you have the document. In test of controls, what you will do is the same procedures that they're telling you will use to test whether that system really works. Okay, so for example, in collecting money, okay, so your client is saying you're selling product, so the customer will of course get the product, and then our cashier will scan the product, and then there will be amount to be paid there. Okay, so if they will pay in cash, so they will give cash. Then the cash, the cashier will count. Then if any change, they will give. FPOS different because you'll get the FPOS machine, and then the cashier will type the amount, and then that will be the card will be tapped, and then there will be like a receipt. Okay, that receipt will have some codes. The cashier will input the codes, and then the cash will be received electronically. Clear? So that is the procedure. So as an auditor, to check whether that is really working, you have to observe. Clear? Huh? So you have to design your procedure in a way that you will be able to test the procedure, the controls implemented by your client. Clear? So many controls. Okay. Let's say delivery receipt. So how the client receive the product. Okay. So are they cross checking the delivery receipt and any invoices there, and then physical count, and then count before they receive, they will manually count it and then cross check with the delivery receipt and then say okay, is correct, then receive, they will sign, and then an independent person will review the work. As an auditor, what you will do is to review that process. Clear? That is what we are doing in test of controls. So why we are doing that? Remember, good control. You studied this in your favorite cost accounting, right? If the process is really strong, it will produce good result, good product, right? Your favorite spoilage in cost accounting? That's headache. Okay? I know. But we know that if the process is really strong or the controls are really strong, we expect that the output will be correct. That makes sense? Yes? So as an auditor, if that process is really strong enough to prevent and detect material misstatements, we will reduce our work in substantive procedure. Clear? Am I clear on that? Okay. So what will happen in substantive procedure or test? It is designed to check the monetary units misstatements or the assertion. Going back to that receiving of money, cashier. In test of controls, you are reviewing how the process works and check whether the process is really strong enough to uh, prevent and detect material misstatements. Okay. But in substantive procedure, it's different. What you will do now is you actually count the money and cross-check with the paper trail inside the cashier, or if it is electronic, uh, you check the computer audit trail whether the amount recorded in the machine will tally with the cash. Okay, on hand and even the at post sales summary. Am I clear on what I'm trying to say? So in substantive procedure, you are directly hitting the accounts. Unlike in test of controls, you are just observing, reviewing the process because the philosophy behind that is good process will have good result. Okay? So if you believe the test of controls is not enough to prevent material misstatement, I don't know for some reason, maybe the cashier has the magic hands, and then the money will just okay, be hidden on the sleeves, and I don't know for some reason. Okay, so if you don't believe that the controls are strong enough to prevent and detect material misstatements, you do substantive testing. Okay, now it depends on whether the controls are really strong or not strong enough. Okay, if it is strong enough, you reduce your work in substantive testing, which means you don't need to perform a lot of testing or substantive procedure to test whether the assertion is correct. But if the controls are really weak or poor, so possibility that there might be some misstatements. So you will increase your audit substantive procedures. There it's only like a weighing scale balance. Okay. Right. So test controls objectives is to there will be two important objectives: to obtain audit evidence whether controls are operated in accordance with auditor's understanding and as documented during the risk assessment process. Policies and procedures to obtain, check, Okay, clear? And then to confirm whether the controls functioning effectively throughout the period of intended reliance. When you say intended reliance, you have to make like a coverage when you will do the test of controls. Okay, it's not like randomly you will check. It should be properly planned. Okay, normally if you're doing test of controls, I don't really suggest for you to do test of controls during the high peak season. Why? Because first, there will be possibilities of error there, okay? Because of so many transactions happening. So you cannot really rely on a high or efficient internal control during that period because it's really quite difficult for anyone as a human being to perform at their best, particularly on busy times. Okay? So you have to find the right time or period for you to do the test controls. But I'm not suggesting to do it off peak because not much transaction to test them. So you get the normal, a regular period, okay? So you have to do that with the intelligent clients, right? Okay, so take note of these three: nature, timing, and extent. This might be useful, especially in your audit profession in the future. Nature will include why you're auditing and what will be the procedure that you will do. Okay, so coming back to that testing of the cash receipt in during the sale. What is your objective there? Can you create an objective why you want to test that? Why do you want to test the cash receipt process? Hmm. The usual words will be to obtain an assurance or to ensure that. Okay, so you create some particular objective. You will put that in a audit objective. To obtain an assurance that the cash received by the cashier had been okay, uh, properly accounted for. Sort of like those words. Okay. So using that assertion, sorry, that objective, now you will say what will be your procedure. That is nature, huh? So the procedure will be uh, to attend and physically observe how the cashier receiving the money. Clear? Okay, so that's nature. Timing. When you will do it. Normally, we will suggest two periods. So at the minimum, two periods. One is usually not on the peak season, anywhere not close to the balance date. And the other one is what we call uh, close to or at year end. So which means it's closer to the year end. Okay, so here and here. Why we're doing that? Okay, we are checking initially and then confirming. Clear, huh? Checking, confirming. When you check first, you will confirm it in the second test if that is really working. Got it? That's normal. Huh? You can do more than two, but basically you need to do two testing. Okay, clear? This is a tip, auditors in the future. Okay, and that's the reason why in some of the surveys and evaluation they do twice in a year. One during the mid sessions, and the other one is close to the year end. That's the philosophy behind that. Okay, clear, future auditors? So we already have the timing. And also timing, it depends on the risk. The higher the risk the account will be, the more likely that you will do the testing at close to year end. Clear? Huh? If uh, if the account or assertion is low risk, which means not much issue on that, normally we will test the item interim, which means maybe middle of the year or anywhere between that and just reconfirm it at the final or close to year end. But if the account or assertion is too risky, we will put our effort and check accounts at year end. Why? Because it will reflect on the financial statements. Any accounts that we want to test, that is at risk, we put it at year end. Why? Because it will reflect in financial statements. Clear? And you as an auditor, what you're doing, besides taking coffee, is to test the assertion. And assertion will reflect on financial statements. Clear? Okay, so this one I'll make you to read it. Huh? Already mentioned timing, extent. Now in extent, how many tests you will do, how many evidences that you will obtain, and what is the quality of evidence that you will obtain. That will be playing on the part of the extent section. Okay. In checking the existence of property, how many times you will do that? Once. Checking invoices, okay, how many or how many, let's say, number of monthly sale you will do? How many months of sale? Only 1 month? Will that be enough for you? I'm not saying you have to check all the sale will happen in 1 month. What I'm trying to say is the timing and the extent. Will 1 month will be enough for you to say, okay, I think the sales is doing fine. What's this? 1 month? Again, I cannot question your judgment. Because if you're in the audit field, you will be the one to say if that is enough. If you think that the sale happening doesn't have much risk, 1 month may be enough. If the sale is having too much risk, 2-3 months testing of sale will be needed. It's up to you because you are the one who will be judging. Okay, but for me, sale is one of the risky accounts, okay, in an organization. So most likely at least test 2 months. A bit apart, huh? Not like January, February, no. So December will be definitely one, and maybe test maybe May or June, July. Okay, so these two you can test. Okay, clear? Depends on the risk. Okay, so this integrated test facility is a bit of a technical, okay, discussion, and it will require some IT expertise. Because in integrated test facility, you will create what we call dummy entity. What is the dummy entity? It can be a project. It can be a project. It can be a transaction. It can be a person. Okay. In integrated test facility, what they will do is they will enter that dummy entity. Okay. If I want to test payroll, okay, in testing a payroll, I'll create a fictitious person. Let's say Mr. A. Mr. A worked 80 hours fortnight. Okay. So 80 hours, and then this is the rate. I'm expecting based on based on the rate given, this will be the salary. Clear? And based on the salary and other benefits, this will be the tax. Clear? But this person is not real. You're just including that as part of the system to test whether the system really works. Clear on that? But it's a bit dangerous, I would say. Because if you forgot that you included the fictitious person, it will spoil the system. So as an auditor, you have to be careful on including dummy entity in the system. Clear? Okay. Example. We can include a fictitious person in that attendance sheet. Why we are doing that? Just to test whether the system capturing the attendance. So you already have an assumed result. Take note that you already have assumed result if you include dummy entity. If that result will not match with your expectation, then something is wrong with the system. Clear? Yes or no? Yes. Because you're expecting if if Mr. A included in the attendance list with no student ID number, take note of no student ID number, still the system capturing that attendance, there's something wrong because what they're trying to say is your attendance will be based on the student ID number, and your student ID number will be used to bill you, right? So without student ID number, how come this system still capturing attendance? Clear? Okay. Am I doing lecture or workshop? Okay. Both. Okay. There is another one. Okay. If you are requiring an employee to have tax identification number before you process the payroll, then you included Mr. A as a dummy entity. You include that, no tax identification number, but still the system is calculating the pay and then calculating the tax. Then the system is uh, cannot prevent any fictitious employees to be included. Am I clear on dummy entity how it works? This facility. Hmm, nice. So I will not discuss about advantages and disadvantages. I already mentioned to you the brief of that. Other techniques for testing. Sorry. Going back to this one. ITF is related to IT. That's why I said you enter it in the system and then test. Okay, clear? Clear on that? Okay. There's a funny story about that. Okay, related to payroll. Okay, if the payroll system doesn't really work properly, there will be what we call ghost employees. Huh? What ghost employees? These employees are being paid, but they're not really employed. Okay, it can happen either the system doesn't have the check, as I mentioned to a while ago about name and the tax identification number and these things. Okay, and at the same time, maybe the system is not updated. Maybe a former employee who resigned the job still receiving money. And in that case, I want to be that employee and then resign. Okay. Will that happen? Yes. Okay. The problem there is, of course, as an auditor, you will now be wondering, hey, how come we obtain your list of your employees, cross-check with your payroll summary, then try to reconcile there were 5 employees who are not in your official list of employees still being paid with salary. Wait. I want to work with a company. So it's fine. I'll work for 1 month and resign. So clear how this like ITF works, testing it. Audit is more of a profession with using your logic and reasoning. Huh? Why it's happening like that? I'm expecting this. Clear? Right. Okay, I'll just mention some of IT system audit here. It says controlled processing, controlled reprocessing, and parallel processing. This parallel simulation is where you will copy the same codes and program of your client and run it separately. Okay, this is much safer than ITF. Why? Because in parallel processing or simulation, the same process and codes, you will include that dummy entity and then run that dummy entity separately. It's safer than the ITF. Same process with ITF. The difference will be this is a separate program. Clear? But of course, if you use this, you will not have that actual experience on the system because you just copy the system and then you run it. Okay, these are IIT. Huh? One of the most or highly paid audit section in audit nowadays is IT audit. So I would suggest maybe after you're completing your degree and CPA, probably some of you are really good at technology, try to venture on that side. I can guarantee you, you will be one of the highest paid in audit firm. Okay? I tried to venture there, but I think IT is not really. I'm good at computers, but IT audit is not really my sort of profession. Okay, but those who are really good at checking codes and these things, I can guarantee you will be one of the precious employees, important employees in audit firm because it's highly specialized. Okay, so I would say you as an accountant, you have more flexibility when it comes to profession because you when you become an accountant, you can become an IT expert, internal audit, management accountant. Okay, of course, external audit will be there, tax consultant. Okay, so you have that flexibility. Okay? And prompt engineer. What's a prompt engineer? You will write 500 words prompt. I think so. But what I do in AI is different. I'll write one line. From that one line, it will give me a response. I'll add additional line and then improve on it. I will have 20 chats from that same question, 20 chats with that AI, and then I will really squeeze the AI to give me the one that I need. Don't do it in one go. I know you're doing it one go. Try to improve. Okay, I cannot stop you on using AI and if I can stop you, I will really do. All right, so non-processing approaches, program code review. This will be done by IT auditors because what they will do is review the code itself, not the process. Okay, so you can see that these are really technical IT work. They will, of course, will require IT knowledge and skills. Okay, let's go to your favorite statistics, the one that you don't want to really miss. Okay, you spend 10 hours a day just studying statistics. Okay, but in audit, don't worry. I will not ask you to do so much statistical analysis. The main aim in audit using statistic and sampling is to determine if the samples or number of samples that you obtain is enough for you to conclude. Right? So those techniques, there are several techniques like random sampling, everyone's favorite, systematic, stratified, block, haphazard. Okay, those are techniques that you can apply. The main aim, take note, is for you to say, I have enough samples to say my judgment will be fine based on this sample. So the issue here is to get the appropriate representative. Got it, huh? Okay, you have heard this in your statistical analysis. Appropriate, so sampling is obtaining the appropriate or true representative of the population. You've heard this in your statistics class. The question is, what is appropriate or what will be the appropriate samples? That's a good question. Okay. So, for example, I want to check whether the student learned from this unit. Okay. I need samples. Okay. And then I got samples from those who really having by chance. Okay. 10% of the students really keen on studying auditing. Okay. And they did extra job. Okay. And then the survey says, okay, these students are really doing in auditing based on our test. Then most likely all the students learn, okay, in auditing. But the 90% of the student, let us say, just for discussion purposes, is not really interested in auditing. Have I obtained the appropriate samples? I would say no, because by chance I selected those who are really intending to join audit firm in the future. Got it, huh? All right. So audit sampling here says we have 100% examination, especially if it is only two or three. You say, I will only do sampling three transactions, I will only audit one. Come on, you can do better than that. Get three. Okay? But if it is like 100, how many samples do you want to obtain? At least 30%. Okay? If I increase it by 10,000 transactions, You said 30 and then you said 10. Okay. Uh, it will increase, right? But of course, the increase may not be that much, like 30% increase. So these are some samples of audit, random selection, systematic selection, and haphazard. Now, you have to be aware of the disadvantages of this, advantages and disadvantages of this selection. Huh? I will not discuss so much on this, but I just mentioned systematic selection. Normally, the problem with systematic selection is that you may create a pattern to select samples. Like for example, I will only audit invoices ending at number 9. So if all the invoices ending at number 9, so 09, 19, 29, 39, you will audit. Now, those invoices ending 0 to 8 will be excluded automatically, right? Clear? Okay, so the systematic selection is efficient but may not be effective. Random selection is always the effective. Problem with random selection is that there is no like there is a system of selecting, but the problem is unlike systematic selection, this one is much faster to do than random sampling. Okay, haphazard is different. When you obtain enough evidence, then you stop. Okay, they call it data saturation. Okay? If you heard that in statistics, you ask so many questions and then you are not getting a different answer, then you will stop. Okay, so someone will ask, is Mr. Milford doing his job very well? One says no, the other one says no, third one says no, fourth one says no. Will you still continue? No, because you already had concluded that I am not getting additional information. So I'll just stop. Okay? Right. Substantive analytical procedure. We have two procedures here so that we will apply analytical procedure. One is risk assessment procedure. I think I have discussed it last time. And substantive analytical procedure. That substantive analytical procedure is a more detailed way of analyzing a statement. Okay? So you can use so many techniques: regression analysis, break even if you want. Okay, so accounting students' favorite. Okay, for the third time you are being asked by this CVP analysis. The third, okay, cost accounting. Right. So many techniques. Okay. Now, in the current age, there is a computerized system or computerized software to do that for you. Large firms will have their own proprietary software. Of course, we cannot teach you that software here because it's proprietary, so which means they are the sole firm using that. When you come to audit firm, you will learn that. Okay, there are free audit software that you can also learn. You can watch YouTube how to do it. But those are really sophisticated and I would say we don't have that luxury of doing it here in the class. Okay, we were thinking about a crash course, okay, on accounting software. Okay? And now because of AI, it's easy to analyze statements. Okay, but be careful that confidential information will be kept by AI and it will be part of AI, okay, forever. Okay, that's why don't type your name in AI. You will say, what can you say about my Wilfred Lopez? Okay, don't put personal information there because it will be stored and will be shared. Okay, type what other people is saying about Mildred Lopez who are currently working at IBS University, and you have typed all those personal information, it will be stored there. Okay? Oh, now you already did that. Okay, so careful, huh? Okay, consideration in designing substantive analytical procedure. Uh, Reliability of data is important. Sufficiency and amount of difference from expectations will be also a factor in designing or considering Substantive analytical procedure. Okay, let's go on to the another major part of audit strategy, test of details. Test of details is what we call the some of the new auditors will say that this is the real audit. Because here, you will do further review and inspections. Some of the newly joined in audit firm will get bored on observing. I can guarantee that. It's really boring, yeah. What you will do there, you will stand and see how what's happening and then the document. Same thing, eh. I know. So that's the reason why the auditors, the newly joined auditors, will say observation, interview are not really the audit that I'm dreaming about. Okay, but those are really audit because you're doing that work as part of your audit work. Test of details is different because here further analysis, further review will be done. Okay. Test of details, sometimes I call it substantive procedure. Huh? So your focus will be testing of transactions and account balances. Okay, clear? So account balances and assertion and transactions. Now these are audit procedures that you are required to do. Okay, in determining monetary misstatements. One is external confirmation, bank confirmation, and then attendance and physical inventory counts. Okay. So in external confirmation, you are sending letters to a third party, let us say customer or supplier, lawyers, and even banks, confirming something. Okay. How does it work? So if we send customer confirmation letter or debtor confirmation letter, if you call it in that way, you're trying to confirm whether the customer exists. That's the first objective of that one. Huh? And the second objective is to test or confirm directly to the customer the amount that they still owe as at cut-off date. Got it, huh? So for example, you will ask your client, please run your trial balance and all the balances of subsidiary ledgers. Okay, subsidiary ledger customer A says 10,000 kina. So we will create we have a template, confirmation letter to the customer, send to the customer A, kindly confirm as at 31st December 2025, this is the amount that you still owe to our client. Something like that. Now, remember, that's the first objective there is to confirm existence of the client or the customer. So we are expecting, depending on the type of the confirmation that you send, expecting that the customer will respond directly to us, auditor. If we didn't receive a confirmation from them, then that may raise a suspicion. Is that customer really existing? Or maybe someone just created that one and then they put Mr. A 10,000 kina. Clear? So it depends on the confirmation that you send. I'll explain that later. Okay, ISA 505, that's all about confirmations. Uses external confirmation. Rather, it recognizes that confirmation of account balances should be determined based on assessment of their effectiveness in providing audit evidence to support financial statement assertion. Because one of the assertions that the client is saying, this customer exists. Am I correct? If there will be account receivable, there will be, or most likely there will be credit customers, right? And the assertion that our client is saying, this amount is owed by this individual. So as an auditor, we will cross-check that assertion, sending confirmation. Okay? There are two, I don't know if it is discussed here, but there are two types of confirmation. One is positive confirmation. The second one is negative confirmation. Positive confirmation, we are requiring, take note I'm using the word requiring, the customer of our client or the third party to respond back to us directly. Negative confirmation, on the other hand, is different. We send letter, we are not requiring them to respond. They will only respond if they don't agree with the content provided or the details provided in the letter. Positive confirmation letter usually will be for risky accounts. Take note, risky account. Why? Because we want them to respond back to us. Negative confirmation, you will only use that if you just want them to confirm the amount, but we are not necessarily saying that it's risky. Okay, I think it's not mentioned here in the slide, but that's how it works. Okay. Another required thing to do by the auditor is to attend physical count. Okay. So the physical count, your normally in stock take, there will be two individuals involved. Okay. One is the one counting the items, and the other one is the one cross-checking and recording. Clear, huh? Or listing the number of items. Okay. You will see this in the stores that you may have visited. There will be hanging like a tag, audited, okay, counted as of this date. Sometimes the stores may not be or forgot to remove it, but it's there. Okay. So which means they did the inventory count. Your work as an auditor, take note, is not to count all of the items. Your role as an auditor is to confirm and review the process. Clear, huh? Clear on your work. You're not supposed to count also all the items, huh? Let me help you. Okay, we'll count. I'm not saying you're the boss there, but what I'm saying is you're not supposed to do counting of all items. You can count, but we call it test count. What is test count? Okay, so you counted 11. Can I just test whether that's 11? Clear? But you're not supposed to test count all the items. Clear? Future auditors? You want to count also? Yes, mister. If we are counting food, though. Right. Now, take note. It's required, but sometimes attending stock take is not possible. Okay? Especially during COVID times. Remember, COVID times, you're not allowed to go out. You need to stay at home. Okay? So what you will do? You have to do alternative procedures. Now, in that case, you need to rely on documents. What documents? Those delivery receipt, invoices, okay, and then cross-check how many in and out. You will rely, okay, and do some assumptions. But during COVID times, and I have watched one of my former students have done this during the COVID times. They are not supposed to go to, like, because of lockdown, but they need to conduct observation of physical count. So using technology, they use a Zoom. So someone is holding the phone and viewing how the physical stock take is going. Okay. So now the technology is playing a huge part on doing the audit. Okay, but I'm not saying you do it every time, because those are alternative procedures only. Which means if it's really impossible for you to or impractical for you to be in that place, then try to do alternatives. You are invited to do physical count on Gordon's. It's just there. Then you're saying, it's impracticable for me to go in. So please do in Zoom. Not possible. It's just there. Okay, unless there might be some chaos happening there, then it's impossible for you to do. Either you can reschedule it, right? Okay, but saying I don't want to go to physical inventory count or stock take for the reason that you're lazy during that time is not okay, an excuse, okay? Because you need to do it, okay? Unless it's really impossible, okay? Now I mentioned that there is an audit software or there are audit software being used currently. So many audit firms have subscribed with audit software. Big Four, they have their own. They created their own software and then using it. Uh, I would believe that mid-year audit firms have purchased what we call generalized audit software. Let me explain that. which means it's just they just purchase it and do some tweaking just to make sure that it will work on what they're expecting. Okay, audit software is used to further analyze transaction. They can also do run sampling. They can generate sampling and based on the criteria that you set, they will select samples. Okay, they will also produce the working paper that you needed to support your work. Okay. So those days that you are still required to do handwritten report, gone. Those days that you are required to do Excel analysis, most likely will be gone. Because information that you encoded in audit software, automatically they will analyze. They will do ratio analysis and relationship determination and these things. Okay, good. What will be your job? Your job will be the judgment, decision making. Okay. Now there are also some what we call plugins. They'll just insert like flash drive or something like a sort of USB port thing, and then they will extract information. There from that they can generate analysis. Okay, so there are this is the composition. Okay, generalized audit software as I mentioned to you. Purpose written programs, that is a customized one, which you may have either part of the audit software or you create it on your own. And there will be what we call utility programs and system management programs. Okay, so what are the functions under generalized audit software? Extract data from client files based on criteria specified by the auditor. Test calculation, compare data, select and print audit samples. Summarize data of audit analysis and format and print outputs. So many things that they can do. Okay. But of course, small audit firms, I'm not expecting that they have this. If they have the luxury to pay subscription, then okay. Okay. Because nowadays, there is no such thing like a CD you have to install in your computer. No. Now, most of the audit softwares and even other softwares are what? Cloud-based. So you need internet connection to use that. Oh, okay. Like in the future, if you will be attending that zero training, that's cloud-based. You don't need to install it in the computer. MIOB now introduces cloud-based too. So you don't need to install it in your computer. You can use the software in online. And most of the audit software nowadays are also based cloud-based, which means you don't need to install it in your computer. You just need an internet connection. Okay, going back to sampling techniques. This is now focusing on substantive procedure. We have what we call monetary unit sampling. That is important. This approach is the approach of using individual monetary units of an amount account balance as a monetary sampling unit is known as monetary unit sampling. Your basis will be, of course, depending on the value of the item. Okay, so your reliance will be on based on the amount. Okay, quantified. Okay, or the number. Okay. Uh, so I'm supposed to say something. Anyway. All right, advanced evidence gathering issues, audit procedures for assessing going concern. This one will be able, you will be able to do this particularly on planning stage. Audit of, going concern issues. I'll have a further discussion on this on topic 8. Is it 8 or 7? Yeah, 8. So I'll leave it for now. Now let's focus on audit procedures for accounting estimates. Now, in accounting estimates, most of the accounting estimates of your client will be decided by the management. For example, what will be the percentages that you will allot on aging of receivables? Remember aging of receivables? What's that? Right, so in aging of receivables, your client is determining the uncollectibility based on the number of days the account is past due. So for example, uh, this amount within 30 days it will be paid. Let's say 10,000 kina. Within 30 days it will be paid. If the amount goes up to 100,000 kina, then it will be paid after let us say after 15 days. Okay, so 30 days is the credit terms. So after 15 days, after the credit terms. So which means 45 days. Got it, huh? So based on the amount. The percentage of uncollectibility is decided by management. They can always justify what or why they are judging this is 5%, this is 10%. They can always provide the justification. But as an auditor, you must obtain an evidence how they arrive on the estimate. It should not only be like a random selection and then they will say, based on my crystal ball, it will be 20,000. Based on the tarot card, 15,000, sorry, 15%. It should not be done like that. There should be what? Basis. So as an auditor, you have to ask them what is your basis in accounting estimate. Clear? There should be a basis. And understanding how they do it will give you an idea how to audit. Okay? How to audit the estimate. Okay? So normally, as an auditor, you can put it as part of your interview question, how you are deciding on estimating uncollectibility. How you are deciding on estimating the number of how many years your property your equipment will last. Okay, how do you decide on measuring the cost of your inventory using lower of cost and net realizable value? These are the questions that you can ask in determining how they approach estimates. Based on what they have mentioned and based on the document, you will perform audit. Okay. So these are on estimates, huh? The extent which accounting estimate depends on judgment. Take note that based on judgment, how they do that. Sensitivity of accounting estimate to changes in assumptions, measurement techniques, and availability of reliable data from external sources. So which means if you can verify their estimate using publicly available information, that will be fine. For example, if they base the estimated useful life of an equipment based on tax provision, then that's fine with us because that is their what? Basis. Am I correct? Remember that there will be a list of percentages and number of years and depreciation rate per equipment or per item, okay, issued by IRC. So if they base the depreciation using that, then it's okay. Can you question IRC why they set those rates? You want to question them, you went to town and then you hey, how you come up with this 30%? Explain to me now. Okay? I'm paying taxes, so please. Most likely you will not do that, right? So you will rely. Another issue is audit of related party transaction. So, and I think I have mentioned to you last time, okay? If your parent is asking loans, let us say you got the money, okay, you studied well in IBS University, and IBS University giving you so much knowledge and you earn millions of kina. Free advertisement, like recording. So let's say you got the money, and your parents or maybe your brother and sister, I don't let's remove brother and sister, most likely you will not give loan to your brother and sister. Parents. If your parents ask you, okay, hey son, daughter, I'm really having financial issues. Can I borrow 1 million kina? What will you do? Remember, you got the money, huh? Let us say you reached a point that money is not a problem anymore. I want to be your friend. Okay, so and then your parent asks, will you provide the money? Noah. No. uh, Parent, most likely I will say yes. Brother, sister, wait. So can I assume that most likely you will give the money? Okay. But there are processes, okay, especially if you own like a bank. Let us say you are 70% uh, owning, okay, or owned PSP. Oh my God, I want to be really your friend, okay? So 70%. Will you use your influence to say, hey, guys, managers, my mom wants 10 million in. I don't want those things that you want her to apply those forms and these things doing this investigation. Give 10 million kina right away, or else you can find a new job. What these managers will do, boss? What process? What you're talking about? Just that 10 million right? So related party transaction, there might be possibilities that it didn't go through the normal procedures. So as an auditor, you have to check whether those related party transaction will have a huge impact on misstatements. I'm not saying related party transaction is wrong. What I'm trying to say is there are possibilities. Okay? So those possibilities you need to check. And if it is violating procedures and that procedure is reflecting in the financial statements, you have to tell the board of directors saying, hey, that 10 million penal loan that you provided to the parent of the major shareholder, it's kind of creating some misstatements in your presentation. You have to do something about it. Okay? Again, related party transaction, I'm not saying it's bad, but because of the nature, there might be some instances of abuse of power and probably fraud. Okay? Clear? Now, what will you do if you don't have the expertise in auditing? Not all of us will have the expertise, right? Are you expert on every specialization? Okay. So if you don't have it, you must obtain those specialization. Okay. So before you obtain that specialization within the audit firm, you have to check whether there are a staff or a manager or a former or current partner who have, let us say, those specialized skills. If they have it, then you can either make them part of the engagement team or make them consultant. Clear? There will be difference on that. Huh? If they're part of the team, they're part of how to decide on how to execute the audit. Consultant, on the other hand, will be giving only advice. And it's up to you to take the advice or do the advice provided by the consultant. If you don't have it in the audit firm, then you have to hire expert. Clear, huh? Now, hiring expert, it requires for you to evaluate their same thing, objectivity, their independence, their competence. Same thing that you're doing in your with your audit staff, right? You're asking them, do you have the competency, the skills required to do the audit and these things? Same thing with them. So you have to ask this. Uh, hey, you're telling me that you are expert in structural engineering, but we don't really know. You don't have any like you're not part or you don't have that professional recognition as an engineer. And even let us say you don't have any huge experience on structural engineering. So that is a questionable competency of the person. Got it? So you are not supposed to get those who doesn't have that competence to do the job. Okay. Another one. It's really great that you have this competence on chemicals. Okay, you're a chemist and then this thing, highly decorated person, but you are related to the owner. Okay, will you hire that person? The owner of the your client, your company of your client. Will you hire that person who was related or let us say, brother or sister of the CEO or the major stockholder? Yes or no? Remember, independence. Same thing. Why I'm talking about that independence and these competencies and this thing? Because whatever they do, you will absorb as engagement team, which means you will consider their work as your work. And if it is considering your work, the same thing that you're doing, you're checking whether you have conflict of interest with the client and these things, right? Same thing that you will do with the expert. And another one is component auditors. Okay, let us say you're auditing a big company, and let us say which company? Okay, CPL. CPL have different companies, right? Under them. Okay. There will be a possibility that one of the companies under CPL is already engaged with another auditor. Got it? Huh? We call it component auditor. So what will you do with the work of the component auditor? Because they already audited this particular company, which is under the group of companies, right? Or included in a group of companies. You are the one auditing the parent company. And the subsidiary had been audited by different audit firm. So what will you do as an auditor of the parent company? You will scrap what they have done and then say, hey, we don't really trust you. You are our competitor, so we will do another audit. It doesn't work like that, huh? So what you will do is, same thing, cross-check. Independence, conflict of interest, competence. If you believe that the work is at same standard as if you are doing the same audit, then absorb the work. Clear? If you feel that the work of component auditors are not at par with your expectation, then you can propose that you extend the audit that they're doing. Because take note, component auditors work, same with expert, you will absorb and make it as part of your work. So same standard that you are applying within yourself. Okay, clear? If you are setting high standard within yourself, those work that you are trying to absorb, you have to set high standards too. Clear? So in your assignment, if you're setting your own high standard within the team, you expect also the work to be high standard. Clear? Okay. Another one is internal auditor. Okay, internal auditors are auditors within the company. Now, in internal auditor, same thing: independence, competence, and conflict of interest issue. You can see there's a pattern of what I'm trying to say. Yeah? Those work by other individuals. In internal auditor, you have to check whether the internal audit function is independent. How to check that one? The independence of the internal auditor should be strengthened by reporting line directly to board of directors. If the internal auditors is reporting, take note, functionally reporting directly to board of directors, that will establish their independence because they are not reporting functionally to the CEO. Only those administrative tasks they're reporting, like clock in, clock out, and hiring things and these things. But the report on audit matters will be directly sent to the board of directors. That creates what? Independence. Because board of directors is the one what? Giving that authority directly to internal audit. Clear? Okay, let's give a scenario there. If the internal auditor is reporting to CEO, remember CEO is reporting also to the board. If internal auditors have seen issues in financial report, in operations, they will report it to CEO. And remember, CEO is the one answerable to the board. Will there be chance for the CEO not to report bad information? They will say, internal auditor, thank you for giving this report. I really appreciate it. Okay, you can leave the office now. Throw it in the trash. Okay, I'm in danger. Okay, because negative report about the company's performance will be what reflected on CEO's performance. In that case, if you're the CEO and then someone telling that you're doing bad or let us say poor performance, Will you say to the board that chairman of the board, our internal auditor saying that I'm not doing my job really well? Will you do that? No. So you have to check. Okay, if the internal auditor is reporting directly to the board, that creates independence. Clear? At the same time, of course, you have to check the competence. They created internal audit function and then just report directly to the board, but internal auditor is not trained to do internal audit. Will you believe their work? No. Yes? They are not, remember, there are a particular training, competence that an auditor must have. Okay? For example, as external auditor, okay, I'm not degrading other profession, okay, but let us say an external auditor auditing a company but didn't study accounting. They don't know that's like accounting process. Even debit and credit, they cannot distinguish. Will you believe this independent or external auditor? No, same thing with internal audit. Okay, they must have that training. Okay, again, I'm not degrading other profession. What I'm trying to say is they must have that competence and skills. Okay, clear on that? So as an external auditor, you will rely on internal auditors' work because they have done independent work already. Okay, but before you rely on their work, which will reduce your job, okay, or your task, because it's already been done, right? For example, if the internal auditor already performed bank reconciliation tests, and you already established that this internal auditor is independent, have the competency and skills, and they are really like they have that reputation that they will do it. Will you be performing the test of reconciliation again? It's a waste of time. Why? Because you already relied on you will rely on their work because of their independence, competence, and skills, and free from conflict of interest. So why are you repeating the same job? Clear? Unless you want to justify, boss, I want to collect additional fees, so I will perform. Okay. But that is bad, okay, on your profession. Clear? Right. I think I already summarized it. This one also I summarized. Next, in e-commerce, we have, I would say this may not be updated, but we have two major ways, this B2B and B2C. Okay, business to business and business to consumer. Okay, so what you will do as an auditor is to test the process between business to business and uh, business to consumer, okay, B2C. So as I mentioned, the emphasis on testing e-commerce is more on controls, okay, because e-commerce transaction doesn't have that physical evidence. Okay, if you pay through e-commerce, you will pay directly, and the cash, you will not see the cash flying going there. Why? It's locked, huh? Who locked it? Okay, so your focus on e-commerce is on controls. Okay, you cannot see the physical cash going. Huh? So and basically that's the thing that you have to focus on e-commerce. Okay, so that's the brief of the discussion there. Now, audit of small businesses, and I think we covered this last time. When you audit small businesses, you have to consider uh, certain conflict of interest, certain merging of jobs, because they don't have that luxury to hire additional staff to make sure that there's separation of controls. Okay, so for example, possibility that the person who's receiving the money is also the same person to record and safe keep the money. Okay, in audit, segregation of duties. the traditional hello, marker. The traditional triangle. Actually, they updated it square, but I still will discuss the triangle. Okay, in segregation of duties and responsibilities. It's the best way to explain it. Someone has to authorize. Okay, someone has to have the custody of asset, and someone has to record. You have okay in large company they can maintain this. Okay, someone will need to authorize, which means, for example, if they want to purchase an item, someone has to initiate the transaction, authorize the transaction. Okay, so they will authorize it, request, put it in record, and any item that they will have, there must be someone to have a custody. This ensures that there is no absolute control on a process. But in small businesses, it's impossible. Okay, might be these two will be merged. Only one will authorize, one will record, and at the same time, one will have the custody of asset. Okay? So, as an auditor, you may expect this kind of issues on internal control. So, as you do the engagement, you have to adjust your knowledge on this is a small company, possibilities that they may not have that really a bureaucratic approach in process. So, let's just check. And your main focus will be okay, sorry, it's not mentioned here, but the main focus will be more substantive testing. Why more substantive testing? We are not expecting that they have a strong control, segregation of duties, authorization, these things. Why? Because they're merging some jobs. Clear? So we are not expecting that they have a strong internal control. So your focus will be more of substantive procedure instead of that. And anyway, it's a small company, so you will not perform so much comparing with big companies. Okay. All right. So I'll end my discussion there.